This video has been brought to you by me. Well, my Patreon is a sponsor for this video. If you like these dirty scandals on my channel, then you'll love my Patreon, Ty's Too Hot Hot Mess History. It has all of the stuff that I can't talk about or show here because it's just too hot, too violent, too sexual, too graphic, too much. Come and join us there for the hot mess history. The link is in the description box. Eric Monte was born Kenneth Williams. He was also born in the Cabrini Green housing project in Chicago. Those projects were the setting for slasher film Candyman and 1970s sitcom Good Times. We went over Norman Lear and his interactions with the cast of Good Times in a previous video called Norman Lear Made Good Times Bad by Letting JJ Do His Own Thing. If you haven't seen that yet, check it out here. And my next old school scandal video will be about the TV show ideas that Norman Lear either stole or bought and recreated. He is an iconic TV show producer, but he gets too much credit for coming up with ideas that were not his original ideas at all. So subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can see that video and all of my videos and live streams. And when you subscribe, comment, "I subscribed," so that I can come down there in the comment section and say hello to you. But today, let's get to why you are here. Like a lot of 5-year-olds like to do, when Eric Monte was 5 years old, he liked to play make-believe. He spoke of one day when he was riding his broomstick horse and imagining that he was the Lone Ranger. He recalled this incident in an interview that he did with National Public Radio in 2006. Quote, "I was 5 years old and I loved cowboys. Roy Rogers, Gene Autry, the Lone Ranger, and I had this little broomstick horse, and I was riding around like it was a horse. And this big old white guy came up to me. Now that I look back at it, he might not have been that big or that old, but he was definitely white. And he said, 'Who are you supposed to be?' And I rode back on my little broomstick horse and I said, 'I'm the Lone Ranger.' And he said, 'You can't be the Lone Ranger. The Lone Ranger is white.' So I made a vow then that when I grew up, I was going to make some black heroes." End quote. And that is what Eric Monte did. Whether the characters that Eric Monte created are heroes or not, that's debatable, but he certainly did make black characters that were relatable and in some cases, aspirational. But getting there wasn't easy. Eric Monte knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to be a Hollywood writer, but at least a couple of things were not in his favor on his road to getting there. One, he was a high school dropout, and two, his mother, probably unwittingly, was no help with her discouraging words. According to Eric, his mother told him, quote, "They never have had a black writer in Hollywood. If they ever get one, he's going to be some high yellow black with a Harvard degree, not some high school dropout from Cabrini." Well, alrighty then, Mom. Tell us how you really feel. Well, thank goodness for self-determination. Eric Monte decided that no matter what, he was going to leave behind the poverty, the gangs, the high unemployment, and the drugs that the Cabrini Green projects offered, and he was going to head to Hollywood to write. So with nothing but $5 in his pocket, he hitchhiked his way on Route 66 all the way to Hollywood. When Eric Monte arrived in Hollywood, he met an actor named Mike Evans. This is where Norman Lear comes into the picture. Mike Evans had just gotten a new role on Norman Lear's sitcom All in the Family. Mike Evans was impressed by Eric Monte as a writer, so he asked Eric to help him expand his role on All in the Family. So Eric Monte wrote a script and submitted it to Norman Lear. Norman Lear was impressed, and boom, Eric Monte did what his mother said he would never be able to do. The high school dropout from the Cabrini Green projects landed himself a job working for Norman Lear as a Hollywood writer, and he quickly became one of the hottest writers in network television. Now, With a steady writing gig and the comfort of job security, Eric Monte pitched an idea to Norman Lear. How about a Black American business owner named George Jefferson? Subsequently, George and Louise Jefferson premiered on Norman Lear's All in the Family. George Jefferson was a Black businessman who owned a chain of dry cleaning service locations, and alongside his wife, Louise, lived next door to America's favorite bigot, Archie Bunker. Eric Monte and Mike Evans collaborated again in 1974 and created the show Good Times. Norman Lear was the executive producer. No need to go too extensively into this because, again, we already tackled a lot of the ins and outs of Good Times and Norman Lear in the Norman Lear Made Good Times Bad by letting JJ do his own theme video, which, again, you can see here. But briefly, Eric Monte was a writer for Good Times and even got himself an acting credit on one of the episodes. In my other video, we talked about how Norman Lear's condescending attitude towards the desires of the cast members, mainly Esther Rolle and John Amos, led to them both quitting and being fired from the show respectively. Well, Eric Monte never wanted John Amos to leave either. This was a constant battle between himself and Norman Lear, who would tell him that a strong Black father had no place in a comedy show. For that reason, as soon as Eric Monte got his first good opportunity with another writing job, he left too. That opportunity came in 1974 with a contract for Eric Monte to write a script for a movie called Cooley High, a coming-of-age story about Black teenagers living in projects in Chicago. Only a year after Eric Monte resigned from working with Norman Lear came out with a new TV show called The Jeffersons. It was a spin-off show of All in the Family, and guess what it was about? A Black business owner who owned a chain of dry cleaning stores. The main character's name was George Jefferson, and his wife was Louise. I bet that Eric Monte thought to himself, that sounds familiar. Even though Eric Monte created those characters and the concepts for them and nothing was changed about them in their transition from All in the Family to the Jeffersons, Norman Lear took all of the credit and billed himself as the show creator. The Jeffersons ran for 11 seasons and is still widely regarded in many circles as the #1 Black American sitcom in TV history. These characters who Eric Monte created paved the way for shows like The Cosby Show and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Shortly after Norman Lear hired Eric Monte to work as a writer for All in the Family, Norman Lear told Eric about another one of his potential TV show ideas. Norman Lear was interested in doing another British comedy remake. There was a British show called Steptoe and Son. It was about a junk dealer and it had an all-white British cast. This remake was to come shortly after All in the Family was off and running, and it would simply be an all-white American cast centered around a drunk dealer. Eric Monte told Norman Lear that his remake should star Black American comedian Redd Foxx and have a Black cast. Norman Lear said that he preferred to keep the show all white, plus he didn't even know who Redd Foxx was. Well, lo and behold, when the show debuted in 1972, it starred Redd Foxx with a Black cast, and Eric Monte received no credit. At this point in the story, are you starting to feel like at some point Eric Monte should have known to not approach Norman Lear without copyrighted paperwork or an attorney by his side? Or do you kind of just feel like Norman Lear should have just been a stand-up guy and not stolen Eric's ideas? Put the answer to that question in the comments. I'm just curious to know what y'all are thinking. In 1977, Eric Monte filed a lawsuit accusing CBS and Norman Lear and others of stealing his ideas for Good Times and the Jeffersons. Quick side note, he also sued Bud Yorkin, a producer who had once been friends and worked alongside Norman Lear, as I mentioned in the Good Times Norman Lear video. He sued Bud Yorkin and ABC for stealing his idea for What's Happening, which was a TV show adaptation of Cooley High, But that is just a side note for this video. This video is about Norman Lear and Eric Monte. Eric Monte had a serious lack of business experience and knowledge. Because of that, he received nothing in his lawsuit regarding the Jeffersons and what's happening. But he did win a $1 million settlement and small percentage of the royalties and a 1% ownership stake in Good Times. But would it really prove to be a win in the end? Well, you decide. Norman Lear, now a proven fraud in the outcome of this lawsuit and infuriated by Eric's settlement, took his appalling behavior to a new low when he joined forces with other Hollywood producers who were equally infuriated by Eric's settlement, and they blackballed him. When Eric Monte was being interviewed by NPR asked Norman Lear to respond to the settlement, which proved that he was a fraud. Norman Lear provided no answer. Now, labeled as too difficult to work with, Eric Monte's opportunities to pitch new scripts were gone. But more than that was gone. His luxury home that he shared with his 2 daughters was gone. His Mercedes-Benz was gone. And after making bad investments, including a self-funded stage play called If They Come Back that was supposed to be his big comeback, his money was gone too. Instead of helping Eric Monte make a comeback, the play ended up being a flop, a commercial failure that played a major role in contributing to his financial ruin. He became disheartened and drug addicted. Crack cocaine was his drug of choice, and then he became homeless. His life had come full circle in the worst way as he faced everything that he had left in the Cabrini Green projects when he set out to become a Hollywood writer. By 2003, he had developed a very bad alcoholism problem. Eric eventually declared bankruptcy, and by 2006, he was living in the Salvation Army homeless shelter in Bell, California. One positive note is that he was now off of drugs. Maintaining sobriety was a requirement for all shelter residents, and regular drug testing was a condition of occupancy. Since the height of his career's sitcom writing days of the 1970s, he has only written single episodes for 2 TV shows, The Wayans Brothers and Moesha. He said that his script for Moesha was, quote, the absolute worst script I've ever written, end quote. And if you're wondering if you should be crying about his having had to live in a shelter, here's what Eric Monte had to say, quote, my living in the shelter and my being broke, I see that as a minor inconvenience. Life is way too short for me to let some idiotic thing like that make me unhappy. Please, no, I'm not sad about anything. I love life. I'm as happy as a sissy in Boys Town. My work ain't over. End quote. Eric Monte did write a self-published book called Blueprint for Peace while he was living in the shelter. It seems that as long as he has his sobriety and a computer or a typewriter or a pencil and a notebook, he will continue to write. The last piece of information, personal information that I saw on him, had him living in Portland, Oregon. We salute Eric Monte and wish him the best. I do wonder if Norman Lear will ever speak to him face to face. Regardless, Eric Monte will forever be known as a pioneer and trailblazer in television writing, and he did get to fulfill his dream of bringing heroes that looked like him to the screen. I'll put a link to the Norman Lear vs. Good Times cast video in my description box in case you haven't seen that one already. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Ty Said What Ty Said channel. Please leave a thumbs up and comment so that we can get a discussion going. And share this video on all of your social media, especially your Facebook. That really helps me out a lot. And subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can know when my next video is ready for you. And if you don't like what I'm saying, but you love it, feel free to hit that applaud button just below your video screen there and send me some
donations.
Yeah, baby. See you on the next video.